You have her ID?
Yeah.
You're under arrest.
Your cell phone? No, I don't want to give it to you. Why do I have to?
Because my attorney said not to.
Why do I have to give it to you?
This is evidence.
Evidence.
Do me a favor. She's under arrest.
I have to go with. I have to go. I have to go.
You don't have that choice.
Let me help you out.
No, I have to stay. Please don't do this.
Don't stay. You need to grab the bags. Take the bags.
Yeah.
And you need to wait outside.
Okay.
My husband's almost 80 years old. He can't
Yeah,
come
I
with
can't. Please, can I help?
No, you can't join her there.
Oh, don't do this,
me.
please.
Please.
Oh,
Someone's got
God.
to help him get home. This is terrible. You can't do this. This is insane.
You can hold on to that for me.
Is that okay with you?
Please. You don't have that with handcuffs on. She's not going anywhere. Please. Please.
You have anything in your pocket?
No, no.
Do you have anything of value in you?
No,
Plus, you have a necklace on. You
What I
can
got?
take the
My-
necklace
I'll
off.
take
Yeah, take it off. Yeah.
And the earrings.
And the earrings. They're
You are listening to the Roberta Glass True Crime Report, putting the true back in true crime. From New York City, Roberta Glass is now on the record. Okay. How is everybody? We'd like to talk today about Donna Adelson. Is she taking a plea deal? Looks like it's in motion, maybe, possibly. Both parties are certainly talking about it. So if you missed my show last time, we were looking at Alex Morris, who is still Donna Adelson's lawyer. We were looking at his interview post this debacle. So if you're just tuning in, if you just came out of a cave, a rock, Dan Rashbaum was resigned as Donna Adelson's lawyer because Charlie Adelson would not give his permission to be cross-examined. And now comes up issues that Alex Morris, and not only was Rashbaum tainted, but Alex Morris may have been tainted and may have to get off the case. Alex Morris was talking about Donna's trial. So the entire trial was postponed with jurors waiting to be voir dired in the courtroom. So Alex Morris says he'll be ready by January, February. But Jack Campbell, who is the state's attorney, which is another word for district attorney, meaning the big kahuna, the head honcho, the prosecutor's office there, says that he thinks that's very optimistic. Sounds like no one thinks that Alex Morris is going to last. But Alex Morris is talking about getting into plea negotiations. He seems to not want to go to trial. I mean, you have to think that this wasn't a huge a huge pool of lawyers who would want to represent Donna Adelson. She's, for one, difficult. For two, it's a notorious case. Sometimes that's good for lawyers. It pays well. But the evidence is quite extensive against her. It really needed someone who was really enmeshed. I call him the fifth Adelson, not excluding Robert Adelson, the estranged brother in the Adelson family, meaning Dan Rashbaum is the fifth Adelson. I call him the fifth Adelson. You have to be someone enmeshed like Dan Rashbaum to really want to do this, and also deluded in the same kind of optimistic way that Donna, Harvey, and Charlie Adelson all are. And maybe I could include Wendi Adelson in that. So I made a list. We're going to look at it of the pros and cons of Donna Adelson taking a plea deal. We don't know what they offer. So first, let's review. So for those who missed it, we will get into your comments in a minute. But before we do, let's review from last week. Just take a tiny snippet of what we looked at last time we were all together. So first it was Alex Morris talking, and it was right at the end of his interview. He talks about plea negotiations. Here you go.
I know that you just spoke to, she was sad that she can't go to trial. Right now you're upset that you can't get that trial moving quicker. But would you say that this is all kind of for the best in the long run?
I think so. I think that it's going to open up opportunities as it relates to negotiations. I think that it opens up pathways to and exploring different defenses that may not have been previously available. I think that it makes the situation potentially easier and in the best interest of both Mr. Adelson and Mrs. Adelson in terms of having lawyers advocate for them.
You mentioned the word plea. Do you expect that there didn't seem to be a lot of plea negotiations between the parties from the outside, at least?
Oh, you never know. Ms. Kappelman says, stay tuned, right?
Okay, so that sums it up from Alex Morris. Like, he feels that this is the best way he can advocate for her, meaning the best shot she has is in taking a plea deal. So we cut to Jack Campbell. And this is what he had to say about it. He said, first, he talked about being open to this and open to plea deals. And then it really got to the specifics. And this is what he said.
And going back to a possible plea, are you able to say whether the state has previously ever offered Donna a plea?
No, I'm not gonna get into any plea negotiations at all. Once again, it's inappropriate to do, and there's a specific reason. Just like me not talking about the other facts in a case, the part of the rationale for plea negotiations, and I'm making something up, but if I had somebody charged with a crime and you all heard that he had agreed to plead to some tremendous amount of prison, people might infer that there's no way he would plead that unless he knew he was guilty. And so I don't want to say or do anything about plea negotiations that would possibly bias a future juror by saying, oh yeah, we're on the cusp, or, you know, there's no way there's going to be negotiation the other direction. You know, hey, that means the state doesn't really believe in their case. It can go both ways on that. And so for those reasons, it's inappropriate for me to kind of get into the details until it's actually locked down, because once again, it's going to take a lot, because of media like this, it's going to take a lot of people to find someone who hasn't heard and possibly been biased by the news on this story. And I certainly don't want to create any more by them saying, hey, I watched Jack Campbell being interviewed on September 19th. And based on that, I can't be fair and impartial. So I don't want to add to that problem.
Fair. But it sounds like it's accurate to say the state attorney's office would be open to negotiating.
We're always open to negotiations, even if the negotiations, sometimes our negotiations are fairly harsh. You know, we make plea offers of life imprisonment on a regular basis, but we're still willing to talk. And there's never been a case that we haven't talked to the defense. It's a ethical, appropriate part of the process, and we're certainly willing to talk to anybody, including who knows about this case. If there are other witnesses out there who know something about this case, we'd love to hear from you, because and certainly we would love to hear. We want to find justice for this family wherever that leads us.
That's interesting. So two things there. So if your ears weren't totally open, what he says there is, look, I can't say that we're in plea negotiations, because should this plea negotiations break down and Donna doesn't take a plea or doesn't want to take a plea, and this goes to jury, then I'm essentially tainting her and giving her the appearance of guilt. And this is already such a notorious case. I don't want to do that. However, our plea negotiations are awfully harsh. She said before that any plea negotiations would have to include talking to the Markel family. Now, if you listen to the interviews with Ruth Markel, including the one on this channel, this is how I got interested in this case, is I was approached by when Ruth Markel's PR agent to do an interview, knowing that this is a channel that talks about victims' rights. And of course, I said yes, but I wasn't really familiar with the case. So that's how I got into this case, is through my interview with Ruth Markel. What Ruth Markel says about this case is that Donna was like the conductor in the orchestra. She was the domestic coordinator, the coordinator of it. And so I can't imagine them saying, oh, let her do 3 years, 5 years, any of the sentences you see in these kind of cities like, like New York, Los Angeles, that these soft on crime prosecutors are getting so criticized for, and rightly so, in my opinion. But it does sound like this has created issues. I would think, just because that this is such a public case, such a watched case, and that the focus has always been with the public, and the public will has always been behind getting Wendi, who got the most from this crime, benefited the most. And it seems ridiculous that her testimony is so hard to believe. And it's so enraging to watch her on the stand lie under oath, that he's asking. So the second part of what he said is he's asking for witnesses still to come forward, which in my mind points a little bit to Wendi's case, that they think that they were hoping that maybe that making a plea to Donna to testify against Wendi. They know that the relationship between Wendi and Donna has broken down. So I have all sorts of feelings about this. I can see it both ways, but you'll see where my list goes. And I'm sure I forgot a lot, a lot. It's really hard to think like Donna and not knowing what she's being offered too. So if it's life in prison, there's really little benefit except saving money. The other thing that was missed in this, I think that's not really being talked about, is that Judge Everett said at the end of that hearing that Donna could be liable should she be convicted. And I would think that that would be via plea deal or via jury trial, she would be liable for all the money that the state paid getting this trial in order. So not only does she have to pay Rashbaum's fee, find another whole fee for her new lawyers for basically whole new trial preparation. Looks like I think we're going to go like another 8, 9, 12 months, a year before we see Donna's trial. If it goes that way, she's going to have to pay for all that. Transporting Charlie, transporting Katie, all those expenses, sending out the juror questionnaires, jurors' lunch from that day, possibly. I know that they pay $15 in lunch there in Tallahassee. So either way, it does not look good for Donna. Let's, it's really like a Sophie's choice, right? Before we get into Donna's plea deal, let's get into your comments, shall we?
We got your comment. You had something to say. You were insightful. Oh, so clever. So Roberta's going to read your comments. Hey, Roberta, read those comments.
Okay, let us get into it. First one, Kitties 3333. Make it out on time. So that's Donna's hot mic moment. If you didn't hear, she says, knowing after talking to Dan and knowing what they're thinking up there, meaning up in Tallahassee, meaning Dan Rashbaum has told me that the grand jury is going to meet Wednesday, November 16th and indict me. We might not make it out on time, meaning I might not make it to a non-extradition country, but it's worth a try. So it gives the feeling, certainly in my mind, I have no doubt that Dan Rashbaum helped Donna, told her to look for non-extradition countries if she didn't already know, and that this was all going down, warned her, and was trying to help her flee, which is anybody who's reported Dan Rashbaum to the bar. I didn't want to come off like, I think that's a great thing to do. I think it's about time that these lawyers meet some consequences for their unethical behavior. So how can you do anything but hear the plan? Kitties 3333 says, 33333 says, absolutely. That's how I've always heard it, loud and clear. Alex Perkins, 8433 says, I know details. A client can always change their mind on a waiver. Obviously, Charlie's appellate lawyer said, don't sign a waiver. Plus, Rashbaum had never had one signed, just had a verbal. And that was my point. When the judge was reviewing these conflicts, and it really, in my mind, it falls on Rashbaum and the judge because they're the ones responsible. It's not the prosecution's duty to make sure that they have all these things in order. It's really the judge and Rashbaum. So Rashbaum should have these things in order and the judge should check it. And I understand he could have rescinded at any time. It's just that they never had it done. And they went over all these issues, and Rashbaum went on STS and said, apparently, I haven't re-listened to it, that he had these things signed. He had something signed. So does that mean he had something signed by Donna and not Charlie? Even in the hot mic moment that I played, Rashbaum says that it was bad judgment on his part. Plus, Rashbaum never had one signed, just had a verbal. The judge and Rashbaum should have both rejected Dan Rashbaum, wanting to rep Donna no matter what. This would have resulted in a reversal if found guilty, even with a waiver, too many conflicts. But what you have to remember is if the judge said to Donna, I'm not going to allow this, there are too many conflicts, Donna could have appealed on her Sixth Amendment rights being violated, meaning her right to pick the counsel that she wanted, meaning I lost because I wasn't allowed to have the lawyer of my choosing, and it would have all been reversed that way. So it's a really crazy, sticky situation, and I don't remember ever seeing this in any other case. Have you guys? Let me know in the comments. Even with a waiver, too many conflicts, frankly, shame on Rashbaum and also shame on that judge for allowing it. Ridiculous. Too many reasons. Rashbaum is a carpet-bagging strip mall sleaze. I love that. Carpet-bagging strip mall sleaze. This is Tamara Rutland Mills says our true crime family who were there at the trial reported in that Trashbaum looked as happy and chipper and upbeat as can be in the hallways, byways, both before and after that hearing that day. It must be a relief, though, to get a client like Donna off your back. And he walks away with the money. He doesn't have to have the humiliation of losing at trial, in my opinion. I don't know that it would have gone that way. No one can know unless you're a psychic. But Donna is a demanding client. Don't forget that. She needs a rash sheet. She needs to talk to Dan. I just need to talk to you one more time. And he became her confidant, her lawyer, her son, he's talking on STS that Donna is a loving woman and she reminds me a lot of my mother. Very Freudian, getting into like a very meshed Freudian kind of relationship there. So I can imagine that he was happy to get it off of his back. That reminds me of a carpetbagger. This was a word that was used a lot in the comment section, who after making off with someone's loot, stuffs it into his carpet bag and laughs all the way to the bank. I bet he's good and tired of hand-holding, you got it, Tamara, and being dictated to by both Adelsons. I bet he slept like a baby that night. Yeah, I agree. She's very difficult. She's got a lot of needs, that Donna. Just one more thing, Dan. Can you imagine that? Just one more thing. One more thing. I'll just call Dan. Because you have to remember that Donna doesn't think about other people besides herself. So it's her needs totally. And Dan Rashbaum kissed up to her. It's why she thinks he's the best lawyer. Not only did she choose him, but he flatters her. So he recognizes all her wonderful qualities. So of course he's the best. He walked around the courtroom. He didn't need any notes. And Georgia Cappleman. Remember that little bit that on the jailhouse calls with Charlie? He walked around the courtroom. Wow, that's an achievement, Donna. He didn't need any notes. His closing. Did he really not do his closing with notes? I can't imagine that. He didn't have to look at his notes. Maybe he had notes. He just didn't have to look at them. You always have to listen to the the loopholes in both Rashbaum and Donna, what they're saying. Here, okay, here's my list. Will she take a plea deal? So Rashbaum is gone. So I think that's a comfort for her. I think she thought that I think she's thinking right now, that she'll never find a better lawyer. And she's upset. Right? So she's in that kind of vulnerable state. So that leans a little bit towards maybe being a little bit more open to a deal. Maybe you could also say that it could make her more defiant and steely and angry that her Rashbaum has been taken away from her. But it also points to, I don't think she would be mad at Charlie. They're way enmeshed. I don't think in the way that she could be mad at Wendi. I think she understands that her son might as well be dead. So, right, Charlie is dead to Donna. That's how she talks about him. So I think that she understands that she was ready to get on a plane to a non-extradition country and basically never see him again, be a fugitive of justice. So the ties aren't too tight. They realize that if this went down this way, they would both have to go their separate ways, I think, like outlaws. That's how I see it. But it also points to maybe possibly taking a plea deal, right? She doesn't have to protect him anymore because I don't think she thinks he's ever getting out. Let me just take myself out of here at the bottom. The prosecution wants to convict Wendi most, maybe. I think I should have put a question mark behind that. Question mark. If I didn't, should have. Most question mark. Do they? Certainly the public is most focused on Wendi. That's been my experience covering this case. It's most angry with Wendi. She's the one who benefited the most. So could they be looking to Donna to take a deal and that deal requires her to turn on Wendi? So it's really hard to do these kind of lists when you don't know what the deal is, you don't know what's being offered. So just some possible looking at it just on the surface, not knowing what any kind of details of any plea negotiations, possible shorter sentence. Donna avoids a public trial. She avoids taking the stand. Oh, sorry about that typo. Avoids stress of a trial. Doesn't have to implicate Wendi or Charlie. Question mark. Does she? What kind of deal would be offered? I know she would have to tell the truth, but she'd have to get up there and admit guilt, which is another thing. She also, here's some more reasons. She avoids testimony of Robert Adelson, who was on the witness list. And he's been on the witness list before, but I think he would have testified here. This is my hunch. Avoids humiliating wiretaps being played in court. I think it would have been powerful to have Robert on the stand saying it was very weird. No one was interested in how Dan Markell was killed or who killed him. I was the only one asking that question. Number two, she avoids humiliating wiretaps being played in court. I don't know if she sees them as humiliating, though. That's my view, maybe not hers. She may have thought she did great on those calls. They are diluted. I would think that she would. Less stress on Harvey, who's older and has not taken this well right? Avoids trial costs. Still can claim she was forced to take the deal because Tallahassee is so terrible and unjust. So she can still claim after. She can swear up and down that she's taking the deal on her own volition because she's guilty, et cetera, at the time. But afterwards, doesn't stop her from publicly. What are they going to do? Put her back in jail? From saying, oh, the reason I took the deal is I had no choice. I could never get a fair trial in Tallahassee. And going on her own PR spin. She certainly has the money to do it. Certainly, I've seen it done in other trials. Reason to take the deal. She gets to be a hero. Question mark. Would she be the hero in this story? Would she turn? She told everything she knew about how this started. Would she ever be the hero of this story? How much would she tell? Would she just admit guilt or would she testify? Would any deal have to include her testifying? It's fun to think about. Wendi becomes the villain and Donna becomes the hero. Would that be the reversal there in the public's mind? Let me know what you think. Gets to hurt, betray Wendi, who she feels very betrayed by. If you caught the pre-trial submissions that were coming into this trial, the text messages. One went, "Now you're not guilty. Your lawyer took good care of you. Now you're not guilty," meaning you were before. "Bury me in the dress you bought for Lincoln's bar mitzvah," meaning I'm going to end it all. I think that's what she was trying to say. And then Wendi calls her right on that and says, "Well, I'm going to basically like 5150 you if that's the case." But she says she was used as a babysitter, and now that she's no longer needed, that Wendi didn't check in with her when Charlie got convicted. Reasons to not take the deal: no shorter sentence, right? No chance of acquittal, no chance of exoneration, quote unquote. And I should have said LOL. I don't think she'll ever be exonerated in the public's mind. But she'll think of it that way. Reasons to not take the deal: has to publicly admit guilt, has to admit guilt in front of the Markell family, which I would think would be humiliating for her. Has to admit loss, meaning Georgia Cappleman won and I lost. And this is a family consumed with winning and getting over. No chance to game the system. So Rashbaum was a poker player. I would think that where Donna Adelson and Rashbaum really bonded is in that love of rolling the dice, of the seedy, dealing in the seedy criminal element, and seeing if you can get over, if you can bluff your way through things. There's that moment on the wiretaps where Charlie Adelson talks about being pulled over in his scrubs and how he tells cops when he's speeding to get out of speeding tickets that he's an ER doctor. And Donna's reaction is something akin to, "Oh, that's so funny, clever, wonderful." It's so bizarre, right? Good morals are not appreciated in this family. And has to admit defeat to Georgia Cappleman. Let me know if I left anything out. I'm sure I left a lot out in the comments, but that was my list so far. Certainly, I would also think a big part of this is feeling from Charlie that she can't get a fair trial in Tallahassee. That was something in Charlie Adelson's jailhouse calls that was a constant, on and on and on and on. I'm going to take a short 1-minute break. When I get back, we're going to go over one of those short jailhouse call where they're talking all about Charlie and Donna, Charlie's unfair trial, give us a little bit of Donna's mindset about Tallahassee, Georgia Cappleman, et cetera, and the case against her. Don't go anywhere. I will be back in 1 minute.
A glass of wine. Roberta will be back in no time. This podcast is listener supported, so smash that like button and subscribe, or become a patron for exclusive content if you are so inclined. Have something to say? Shoot Roberta a super chat. She will do her best to read it on air without delay. Now Roberta's back and ready to put the true back in true crime. Here's Roberta.
Okay, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to Roberta Glass True Crime Report. I'm Roberta Glass, and we're talking all about Donna Adelson, who's been accused as being a conspirator in the murder for hire of FSU law professor Dan Markel, along with her unindicted co-conspirator daughter, Wendi Adelson, with her convicted. So she's accused of doing the crime with her son, Charlie Adelson, who was convicted. Catherine McManawa was also convicted of being the middle woman. Charlie Adelson, her son's ex-girlfriend, Catherine McManawa, was convicted of being the middle woman. And the shooter, Sigfredo Garcia, and the getaway man, bag man, like, I don't know, what do you call him? Getaway driver, Luis Rivera, who told everything. He's testified in every trial for a shorter sentence. So we're talking about her possibly taking a plea deal now that her trial was set to go to trial. Should have had the first day of opening statements Friday. But instead, we had nothing because Charlie Adelson would not relinquish his rights because Dan Rashbaum was his lawyer, his Sixth Amendment rights, to not be cross-examined by Dan Rashbaum. And now it looks like possibly her second chair, Alex Morris, may have to go, and she may have to get a whole new defense team before trial. But both sides are talking about plea negotiations. So that's what we're doing today. We're trying to get into her mindset a little bit about how she viewed Charlie's trial, how she views Georgia Cappleman in the case against her this is before she was arrested, after Charlie Adelson's conviction, and they are talking on Jailhouse Line, Charlie Adelson's Jailhouse Line, meaning her son's Jailhouse Line. I feel like I'm talking backwards today, am I?
Suzanne's working on a bunch of different things.
He is. Everybody is. Dan, I said, was about 3 to try, because he wasn't 100% sure he'd be with his kid or the doctor or whatever. But he says, let him at least try me. He said, even if I can talk for a little bit. And then he says, if not, he knows to call me at night. That's fine. And then what was the other? And I think Alex said, what did he say before? After 1? After 1 today.
After 1.
If not, he said after 10. After 10 tomorrow, I think he said. Okay.
Yeah. But I had said to Dan, I said, look, you could have done this case 100 times in Tallahassee. You never would have won. And his response to me was, not with that jury.
That's right. I know. That's what he told me.
But here's the thing. It's not just that jury. Because he didn't have one that gave a shit on that jury. And it's not just the jury. It's the state decided to do a summation of the case. It's turning it into everything but what was said in the courtroom. Took and twisted everything that had nothing to do with me. You got nothing to do with me. Wendy got nothing to do with me.
Sure.
But they.
Okay, so here's an interesting admission by Charlie Adelson. Of course, he's negating his own wiretaps because he can't. This whole family's so narcissistic. It can't be his own bad judgment, to quote Dan Rashbaum, that got him convicted. It has to be his mother's bad judgment in writing those emails, and Wendy's bad judgment in my view, going against what was the plan and driving by the crime scene to make sure it was done, because it was supposed to be done before and it didn't happen. She just couldn't help herself, as Georgia Cappleman says. So he thinks that the things that really convinced people were Donna Adelson's emails to Wendi, which are all coming into her trial. So much of the evidence is the same in these trials, with slight differences from trial to trial if you've been following it. So it doesn't bode well for Donna, excuse me. But if you heard in the beginning, Dan says just, she's on the phone with Dan Rashbaum, and you can hear the kind of calm in her voice. He's going to fix it. Just call him for a second. He's got ideas. That's what I hear. Dad, just if he's might be with his kid at the doctor. So, he's called, but he'll just call him for a minute. So he's going to take calls from Charlie when he's at the doctor with his kid. And that's why they picked him. This guy would work, 24 hours a day for this Adelson family. And just almost get like a virus, their delusion. Excuse me.
They made it, and I said this to Dan a long time ago. I said, Dan, they're going to hate me out there. They're going to make me out to be somebody I'm not. They don't have to like you. None of these people are going to like you on this jury. You just have to know that you're innocent. But I said, Dan, if they hate me, but it's a difference if you hate me because you hate me. It's different when you're making it seem like these people hate Tallahassee and they look down on you in Tallahassee. And it becomes you rich white Jew who likes Nazis from Miami who did this. And you're horrible people. And you hate and you laugh at the people of Tallahassee. And once these people from Tallahassee been down laughing at them, they're just going to go with their common sense. And unfortunately, when you tell people to go with your common sense, and the ex-wife showing up at the team, and she's leaving 48 hours later, I think anybody's common sense would just say there's something has to have been, she has to be a part of it. No, it's a coincidence. Hard to explain away a couple crazy coincidences tied in with other things. And that's when it becomes like to take someone's life away. That's not reasonable doubt.
This is also, if you heard the Karen Reed 2020 special, I got triggered the same way. She talked about not having a life, and same thing as she's been alleged to have murdered via her vehicle, run over her police officer boyfriend, John O'Keefe. This is the same thing. To take away my life? No, you still have a life. It's a different kind of life than you used to have, but you still have a life. Dan Markel does not. And the language that this family uses, it's the same thing that Donna adopts. My son, he might as well be dead, because he's in prison, because his status is gone. I can't brag about him. He's in prison. I mean, everything has been that's so important to them. They're perfect children that they could brag about. My son, who's a periodontist, gone. He's a convicted murderer now. And Wendi, who was always at the top of her class, graduating magna cum laude from Brandeis, not easy to do, now has been, because of this case, been really reduced to what the Adelsons would see as second-rate jobs, third-rate jobs. Certainly not up to her ability or to the track that she was on, right? Not reaching the levels that she reached as a youth. And the way Donna, instead of saying, we did this, she says, Dan Markel is haunting me from the grave. This family has been cursed. That's how she sees it. because none of them can take responsibility.
No,
Reasonable
but
doubt, like,
we know what reasonable doubt is, and there was tons of it, and it was delineated for them, and it was explained to them.
So isn't this interesting that they're all talking about reasonable doubt and that the jury didn't see reasonable doubt? They didn't see Charlie Adelson's innocence. What did an innocent person say? How could that dumb jury see that I didn't do it? Not there was reasonable doubt. Like I might have been in it, but there's reasonable doubt. Like it's so telling that this is the way guilty people talk. Like we know we did it, but we should have gotten over with the bamboozling case we put on. We really thought this would bamboozle the hick jurors of Tallahassee, but we did it. So mad at them for not being bamboozled by our plan, because it was a good plan. We had reasonable doubt. Be screaming up and down. When is Katie going to talk? When is someone who saw this extortion, heard about this extortion going to talk? When is a witness going to come forward? When am I going to get out of this? When is the truth finally going to be revealed? Who knows something? What did I ever do to Katie to be so cruel to me? That's what you would be saying.
But Charlie, honest to God, it didn't matter. Just what they knew what they were going to do before. They knew what they were going to do.
For Dan to say to me on Friday, I said, how's everything coming in? I mean, how is it looking? And his words to me were, if you would have told me 2 weeks ago that we'd be where we are today in the case with how it's coming in, I would be ecstatic.
Yeah, because that's after you testified. It was amazing. Yep.
Well, not just me, but what he was able to get out and admit to from other people in the case.
Right.
The other witnesses. Like, he was destroying them. So, like, he was destroying them after the weapon had testified, and then damn the closer. She turned, and I don't even know if it was her, because I can tell you when I came in the court on Monday morning, Dan said to me, he said, listen, closers really don't do much. He said, statistics have shown jurors kind of have their mind made up to answer the closing, because the closing is definitely in the state's favor because they get the first word and the last word.
Right.
So it's very, it's a bad burden of proof, but the burden of proof is not y'all. Use your common sense, because what happens is the coincidence becomes common sense. Is that the chances of that happening and it happening the way she said are 1 in 10,000.
Right.
Once you do that and you go, look, I'm a postman, I drive routes, I go streets, you ain't showing up 17 minutes away on a street on a time unless there's something going on there. If there's something going on there, there's something going on here.
Right. So the jury just got a whiff of a suspicion, and they used that and thought that the state met its burden because they all had a hunch that he might have done it after this evidence. Not that they were completely convinced. Didn't need much time to talk about it, 2.5 hours. And I will tell you, someone who just sat as a juror on a criminal trial, that the advantage that the defense has is that you're looking at this person every day and you're looking for anything to get them out of it that you can hang your hat on. You are not looking, I will tell you, you recognize the immense responsibility you have. Certainly no one in my jury was going in there lightly. People were weeping. The first vote was 11-1 guilty. And when we turned the one juror, I didn't have much to do with turning her. But when she was confused, misheard the evidence, et cetera, when she turned to guilty, people were weeping. No one was like, nobody can be happy. I mean, you can feel satisfied that maybe you're giving the victim some justice, but No one goes into this lightly. Very aware that person's future, not their life, but their future is in your hands. Let's put it that way.
That's a very simple way of looking at it. But you only have 110,000 chances to get wrong. It's comforting, you know what I mean? Like, what are the chances that it was happenstance? You know what I mean? Like,
I do.
I mean, that would be like, put it this way, that would be like, if on the night of the 18th, it said, she wasn't in my house, but she was in the neighborhood looking at homes to buy randomly. She was just checking out the neighborhood, and that's why her phone was there. Because she was just in the neighborhood looking at homes to buy. I mean, could that happen? Yeah, but if someone said that to you, you'd be like, come on, it's 25 minutes away, looking at homes to buy on that night in that neighborhood, and her phone's being there. Could have been.
It's off topic. It just occurred to me. You had said about U.S. legal funding and Dan and Ramsey, and you said wait 2 to 3 weeks. But Dad was the other day speaking and now texting with Ramsey. So is that okay? Because they're doing something together, which I think is fine.
Oh yeah, no. Okay. Well, if you want to make a note, I'll tell you what to get.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. What we need to get is copies of the fraudulent check.
Hold on, wait.
Ryan.
Copies of.
Okay. The fraudulent checks that I was writing to people who don't really exist in your life.
Just a minute. Right.
So he's admitting to writing fraudulent checks to people who don't exist in Donna's life? Is this for his appeal? He's like, I know I'm being recorded, wink, wink, those fraudulent checks I was writing to people who don't really exist in your life. Is that what this is about? What is this about, guys? Did you guys hear that?
Okay, got it.
So like, okay, so let me give you an example, like the name Donald Nickens or Brianna Johnson. There are these names down.
Yeah, I am. I'm Brianna Johnson.
Yeah. Nicholas Milano. Nicholas.
Does he have this information or no?
Yeah,
Okay.
he does.
Okay.
So I'm just giving you a couple of names on this.
Yeah.
This is on Kyle Kozlowski.
Kyle was the first name. Kyle Kozlowski.
Very similar to an agent.
Yeah. You need copies of the front and backs of those checks.
Of all the checks, here's a list. There's about 12 people. The 12 or 13 checks about that were actually just made up names.
Yeah.
That's the first thing.
Okay.
The second thing that we need to get is there were 13 checks written by Berman. So keep that as item number 1.
Okay, got it. 1.
Item number 2
Yeah.
is there was 13 checks for $63,000 and change that was written from Berman Law Firm to Ryan Fitzpatrick. And he was doing that to settle the cases on which that the company had liens.
Wait.
So I guess this is to close out Charlie's businesses. His businesses, quote unquote. I think Murder by Maestro has done a lot of research on this. So what Ryan Fitzpatrick was doing was they were buying people's legal suits, like their civil suits, and paying out on them. I believe that was one part of their business. Am I right about that?
Okay, got it.
So it sounds like he's trying to get this money back from Ryan, proving that they spent all this money and that Ryan received all this money so he can use some of it to pay his lawyers. I would think. It doesn't sound like it has to do with his case that he was just convicted of. I mean, the murder of Dan Markel.
Number 2.
That's it. So the money going out was being written to people that don't exist in real life, and he was cashing the checks by somebody in the bank or wherever it was being cashed. We'll have to check. They'll have copies of it wherever it was cashed. That's number one. Number two, we're going to probably have to sue the government to be able to get the copies of the checks that they were, to get the copies of the checks that they were writing to Ryan. Ryan sent the Bermans an email that said all bank accounts have been closed. Please make all future checks out to Ryan Fitzpatrick, and I'll come by the office and pick it up.
And Ramsey has that email, right?
He has that email and everything. Unfortunately, when Ryan testified, you can't.
Right, and it really bothered him that Ryan was described as his best friend. His best friend. He was obviously his friend, close enough to put him in charge of all this business, his side businesses. And Donna's just like, oh, tell me more about your semi-legal businesses. Tell me more about your fraudulent checks on a jailhouse line. Tell me more of some of the crimes that you did and let me cover up for them. See if we can get some money for them. This is the most criminally minded family. So wild. Xendava says he can forget about getting money from Ryan Fitzpatrick. That money is gone, dude. So true. So true. Right on the money there.
Produced collateral stuff from another case. So, like, we couldn't show the checks that were written to Ryan from the Bermans and say, why are you cashing checks? Because it's a separate issue, rules of evidence. So even though he was doing that, we couldn't bring that in.
Got it. I didn't realize that. I wondered. Okay.
Yeah, no, there was so much that we had, you can't bring any of it in. It's a separate issue. You can't bring in separate unrelated issues. So,
Yeah.
but the money going out is institutional fraud. The money coming in is corporate embezzlement. So what happened was, it was probably about, if the case was paid out fully, it were probably worth over $500,000 what was owed the company.
So basically, he's saying that there's some kind of fraud that he didn't realize he was a part of, and they're going to get Ryan Fitzpatrick for it. I mean, this is just all about getting revenge on people that got them. This is a common theme for convicted people and formerly convicted people.
Except he was letting them pay pennies on the dollar, write the checks in. That would be like Erica working at Dad's office, and then when a patient owes $1,000, they write me a check for $30 to Erica Johnson. The theft is not $30. The theft is actually $1,000. That's what we're doing. So even though he stole $63,000, it was actually $500,000 in theft. That's what was owed the company. You see how it works? So if Dad had $1,000 crown and Erica told somebody, hey, write me a check for $30 to Erica Johnson, and I'm going to tell Dr. Adelson, you died and you couldn't pay a bill. The $30 check to Erica, she didn't steal $30. She stole $1,000 because $1,000 what was owed to the company.
Right.
That's where that $500,000 number comes from.
Yeah.
Got it. That's where that's where the money making comes in. This is crazy. Oh my God, a bunch of criminals. This is how the scam works. He pays, so someone comes in and they're getting, so they can't wait for their settlement. So they're getting this much money. So we're going to pay them this much money, but it's really the settlement for, I think that's what he means. That's what I remember. But I also think that there was another business. Murder by Maestro would know better than I, had to do with purchasing supplies too, I thought. I'm a little rusty on this. I used to be really sharp on it. Forgotten exactly how the criminal scam works. Please refresh Murder by Maestro. Thank you for moderating, by the way. If you're in the comments, let me know.
Yeah. Okay. So I have that, the whole book. I've got it. Take care of that. Yeah.
To trust me, I want to have that too.
I know. I know.
Oh, you got no idea.
Yeah.
Trust me.
Yeah. Okay. A lot of things to follow through on. So
Yeah, he thinks he got away with that one.
I know he did. It shouldn't last yet. Not over.
It's not over. You haven't seen the last of the Adelson family yet. A lot of things to do. I'm going to stop my weepy voice, my emotional voice that goes away just as quickly as Wendy's emotional voice goes away in her huffing and puffing in a police interview. See-through says this just proves Donna would sign any check put under her nose. That's good for the defense. Ugh. Yeah. And to get over and get back their enemies. This family loves to win, loves to get over. So I don't know. I mean, if I had to bet, I don't think Donna is ever going to stand up and admit guilt, no matter how good it is for her. But I mean, even if they offered her, say, 20 or 30 years, she's in her 70s. That's a life sentence, really. So I don't think she's going to be taking it. I mean, what, to spare her family money, to put someone else first, like her grandkids? I don't see it. She comes first. So I don't see her playing out, but I think certainly the state will try. You heard Jack Campbell say he will try. I don't know. But that gives you kind of idea of, all these calls are so telling and gives you an idea of what she thinks of the jury in Tallahassee, the Georgia Cappleman, et cetera, et cetera. I've played all of them on this channel, or most of them. And it gives you a very good insight into Donna Adelson's mind set and how she sees the reality she wants. She's completely deluded. She thought Charlie did great. All her friends told her he did great on the stand. So of course he did great on the stand. Everybody else is too stupid to see it. He didn't come off like a guy totally rehearsed who had tailored his story to the evidence. No, he was open and honest, and the jury should have bought it. We put on a great show. They should have been bamboozled. Why weren't they bamboozled? That's the essence of these calls. Not, how did this happen? This is all big one misunderstanding. When is it going to get ironed out? Who's going to come forward? Why doesn't Katie tell the truth? When is Luis Rivera going to tell the truth? Why don't Sigfredo? How can they live with themselves? That would be an innocent person's rap. All right, just a little bit more of this, and then we're going to read a victim impact letter.
I mean, that's the same thing. Checks were written to him. The Bermans didn't have to say it. They were in on it. Or Ryan was stealing.
Yeah.
But it was the, and you know, like when we were deciding our jury panel, like we were trying to decide, like there was one kid on there, he was a 24-year-old African-American kid.
Mm-hmm.
His dad was a sheriff's officer in Jacksonville. So it's like, you know, like I said, we had 5 people in our panel who had law enforcement in their family, 3 that either they or their wife worked at Florida State. Like, you know, he's this fat, disgusting white guy that was like, looked like an inbred, disgustingly fat. He worked at the bookstore at Florida State. Do you think he ever written a book? He's reading about the author.
Let's not go down that track. That's okay. I know.
No.
Donna's smarter. She's like, yeah, don't really start. We all know the jury was stupid. Too stupid to be bamboozled by us. Let's not get into specifics. We all know we feel that way.
But I'm just saying, like we were going to keep that kid. It was, our choices, it was literally between that kid and, like, the way it works is like, you know, you look at your strikes, you look at the people you have to get off, like, strike, and, like, we almost kept him. It was the choice between him and, I think maybe it was the guy who was an Army sergeant 20 years and then went to work for the post office. So he retired from the Army after 20 years as a sergeant, and then went to go work at the post office in Tallahassee. He made his retire in the post office too. But he looked like he was in his late 50s. So he may have had two government jobs and retired from the post office here in Tallahassee. He probably did the Army from when he was, you know, 20 to 40, and then worked in the post office from 40 to 60. Yeah. Well, you know, there's a choice between him and the 24-year-old African-American kid whose dad is a sheriff's officer in Jacksonville. You know, how much does that kid have in common or can relate to me? Probably really little. You know, probably would have gone with whatever everybody else was saying.
Well, I love it. And this is the other thing that the Adelson family thinks is that a jury of their peers, so a jury of Donna's peers would be seasoned, more, let's say, what is a nice way to put it? Mature women, Jewish women from Miami with all her same criminal values. Like her friends, like your circle of friends in Miami. That would be a jury of her peers, not just like your fellow Americans is basically what it means. And Charlie thinks he should get 12 periodontists, criminal periodontists, his age, Jewish, you know, everything can relate to him, making exactly what he was making. If anyone's making less, they can't relate to him. Like we're all so special. I mean, as you get older, you realize that we're all more alike than we are different in life. Human beings, we like to think we're so special that no one can relate to Charlie's in superior intellect and charm. I mean, this is crazy.
Is he going to be the one to pour over the evidence and discovery when everybody already made up their mind?
Yeah.
See how they pick on the jury? I mean, if you were really innocent, you'd be going back going, I didn't do this. They all conspired against me. They all threw me under the bus to try to save themselves somehow, I guess. I don't know. His whole story is so convoluted and crazy. I guess you don't want to talk about that, his payment plan from the Latin Kings, but that's what happened. That's what they'll say on these calls. That's what happened. They couldn't believe it was all just a coinky dink. And the jury didn't get the context. What context would any of those calls have made sense in besides conspiring to murder Dan Markel. What was going on at the time? It's wild. Wild, wild, wild.
Mm-hmm.
It was, you know, it was exactly what I thought it would be when I was living in South Florida. And I said, and it's funny, I mean, I hadn't even spent really time up there. It was just my gut from everything and the feelings I got from people that, like, this was going to be an absolute circus. It was going to be Tallahassee versus Miami. It was been already vilified. And there's not, as I said before, there's not a chance in hell I'm about to get a fair trial here in Tallahassee. Not a chance in hell. And we did everything we could. You know, we brought in the best consultants. Well, I don't need the best consultants to tell me the 911 operator's hand shouldn't be on my jury. You know, I don't need the best consultant to tell me that.
Now Josh Dubin, the Innocence Project ambassador, who brought on a guy said was rehabilitated and had been over sentenced to show how people can be rehabilitated in prison and how what a tragedy his over sentencing was, while leaving out the key details of why he got such a big sentence. Presented him like a victim. This is Charlie Adelson's jury consultant, Josh Dubin, who's also a Innocence Project ambassador, brought on Sheldon Johnson onto the Joe Rogan show and said he's a miracle of rehabilitation. And it was an absolute travesty that he got so over sentenced because the judge let him go on these really violent charges with slaps on the wrist. But he's like, third time, we're going to throw the book at you. And that's what he did. He's like, yeah, he only got a scratch, but that's like something. He only got one wound on the back of his head, but I believe that was from a bullet hole going through it. Anyway, that guy, 2 weeks later, this is Josh Dubin's great miracle of rehabilitation. This is Charlie Adelson's jury consultant. 2 weeks after being on Joe Rogan, murders and body parts are found in his body, in his apartment, and in his victim's apartment. So that's Josh Dubin. Absolute another, in my opinion, Josh Dubin, absolute con artist. He's like, even here, Charlie Adelson is like, look, I didn't really need that jury consultant. My common sense, really, did your common sense tell you, Charlie Adelson, who should have been on the jury and shouldn't have been off the jury? You just didn't have enough strikes to strike the entire jury pool of Tallahassee from your jury. Anyway, I think that's it. All right, 2 more minutes, and I think that's enough.
The person who's listened to all 6 parts of the podcast is probably not really going to be that fair. Like, these are people who are telling me they can be fair. Why are they saying that? They're lying to get on the jury. Like, blatantly lying. You know, but if they're blatantly lying, you can't prove it, they're going to be in the pool. If you want to get them off, you got to do one of your exes.
Yeah.
Like, it was completely unwinnable. Completely unwinnable, because for Dan to have the case come in better than he would have expected.
Right.
And on Friday they say I'm ecstatic for where we're at. Like, I mean, I talked to him on Saturday. You know, he did very little work. He slept a lot. He caught up on his sleep.
Right.
He's like, look, I'm just recharging my batteries. He definitely worked for a while on Saturday, but it wasn't like he cranked it out on Saturday. He was like, listen, get some rest. He's like, I'm going to rest up today. He's like, I slept in. He's like, I needed to sleep after the exhausting trial so far. Schedule we're keeping. He's like, I really didn't do a whole lot. And then Sunday, he's like, I'm going to be, you know, cranking it out. And like, he was like on a regimen that was like, you know, he's like, I may go to sleep early and wake up at 3 in the morning and start working again. I'll probably do that. So I said, don't call me after 9. If he was like in his zone, he was locked in and he's a closer. But nothing mattered. Nothing mattered.
He's a closer, meaning his closing arguments are so persuasive, which I didn't find. And I'm sure Dan Rashbaum did work hard for them. It's just, unfortunately for Charlie Adelson, it's really the case is impossible to win. Not a lot of people want to be Donna's lawyer. Adam Kamazar is like DUI lawyer, or I think he'll probably be off the case if he's not off the case already. They pulled them in at the last minute to try to save it, try to go to trial. I don't think he's going to be on the case. I think they're going to have a whole new cast of characters, and who they are, it's going to be interesting to find out. Who's going to take Donna Adelson's case if she doesn't take a plea deal, which I don't think she will. I can't imagine the state offering her something. Can't see her testifying against her daughter, but who knows? She could surprise us. Let me know what you think. Everybody's predicting Charlie Adelson testifying against his mother. I don't think he will. But you never know. I could be wrong. They could have made a deal with Charlie and make a deal with Donna, and it's all coming out. And my only thing I feel strongly is that after Donna, it's Wendi is going to be coming up. That's how I'm feeling now. That changes sometimes. Sometimes I doubt it. Sometimes I think it'll end with Donna. But right now I feel like the public will is really on Wendi. She got the most out of this. This was done for her benefit, for her to walk away with this untried, even if they lose, even if the state loses, will be a travesty of justice, I think. And this has just been so long for the Markells. I just feel so terrible for them. So this was a victim impact letter. I'm going to end the way I usually do in this case when I'm talking about this case. I think it's going to be, quiet for a little bit. I think, with Donna, I think we're going to go through this whole process over again with status hearings. And we're looking at, I think, another year. I think this time next year, maybe this summer earliest. The Honorable Robert Wheeler in Catherine McManus' case. Dear Sir, I remember when I first heard the news that Danny had been shot. I was standing at my kitchen sink, washing my napping toddler's sippy cups when the call came in. In disbelief, I turned around and called my college roommate to say, "Oh my God, something's happened to Dan. I think he's dying." The horror of those moments has only been eclipsed as the true story of Dan's stalking and murder have come to light, as we have learned the gruesome, greedy details of his final moments in pain and suffering. Murdered solely because he loved his boys, Link and Ben so much. I first met Dan in 1991 during the first weeks of our freshman year of college at Harvard, where we lived across the yard from one another. He formed an immediate impression: sunny, happy, charming, a smart aleck, nerdy guy who really couldn't take himself too seriously, yet had every reason to do so. He was brilliant, and he was the most personable kid I met that year. We tagged each other over the course of the next few years, Dan dedicated to the study of law, of righteousness and justice, me circling around the same, but more interested in a life working towards human and civil rights. Summers in Cambridge, Dan gathered friends together, hanging out in the garden of the house he was sitting that summer. Marty Perez wouldn't mind. He'd say, "Stay a little longer." And we'd stay a little longer, not wanting to leave his or the evening's golden glow. A few years later, Dan welcomed me to law school with his same boundless enthusiasm. He'd gone a couple years ahead of me and was eager to convince me to try out for the law review, to advise on course, to introduce me to his friend Steve, Justice Breyer now, to debate some convoluted point of law or other. We'd adventure a bit around campus, and Dan would do his best to dispel my first year insecurities, to convince me that not only did I belong there, I could thrive. And it is this Dan that I miss the most. The big-hearted, generous, most encouraging genius who was convinced that we all had value, that we all had something worthy of contributing, not just to the academy, but also the world beyond. Always kind, always doing his best to convince others to believe in themselves as much as he did. That is Danny in my mind. I miss him so. Years down the line, after I returned from work overseas, Dan and I started catching up in some of his famous calls. Annie, he'd say, you've got to. And he'd go on to try to convince me to reach for my dreams, to write some article or another, apply to law professorships, to break out of my single parent shell. Because in that area, Danny came before me a few years too. His boys are just a couple years older than my own, and my ex walked out on me just a short while before his, similarly pursuing a highly contentious custody battle. We commiserated over our losses, compared notes, and were astonished at our surreality of our situations, and we treasured our babies. I do not know if I have ever heard anyone treasure their time with their boys as much as Danny did. He was his old effusive self to a factor of infinity, so utterly in love with those two magical creatures he helped create. I cannot think of their loss. It is so great as to be actually completely unimaginable. Similarly, I do not know how Danny's wonderful family continued to bear this excruciating ordeal and this heartbreaking loss. I miss Danny incredibly. I didn't discover until years after his death that he'd considered me a freshman year crush. How blind I was. So sorry, Danny. And I have missed his encouragement, support, and words of wisdom as I have struggled to find my feet again as a single mom on my own. I never did manage to hit the academic job market. I do believe had he not been killed, he would have gotten me there eventually. And I think often of where he'd be, where we'd all be, had he been allowed to live. I still cry for him, for his boys whom he loved so deeply, and for the collective loss we all have suffered. When I think of what could have been, sometimes the tears come when I'm at my sink looking out the window, just as I was those years ago when we first heard the awful news. There never was and will never again be another like him in this world. Respectfully yours, Amelie van Briesen. That's what I have for today. Please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, share this episode, leave me a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and I'll be back. I'm off tomorrow, but I'll be back Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern. Have a great night, everybody.
what a stitch you're in. You plotted a murder, 'cause you wanted to raise your daughter's kid. Tallahassee is just a stop on the way to civilization. Miami is where all the fancy people are at. The TV is about 5. You can't get away from that. Two-toe, tay-toe, hoo-ho, you know the guy you pay, and you can't get away from that. Oh, Donna, what a stitch you're in. You thought jail was just for the little people, but now you're so blankets with the locked up crew. You're a grandmother in lockdown, and your one-way ride to freedom you blew. Oh, Donna, what a stitch you're in. Your family are exiled from the social circles you swam in. We all know you never made that banana bread or offered to babysit for Dan, but you'll soon be making license plates and thinking